Welcome to the Stogie Geek Show, episode 119. This episode is sponsored by Mr. J's Havana Smoke Shop. Located here in Rhode Island, they have an outstanding selection of premium handmade cigars. And by the Havana Cigar Club, located in Warwick, Rhode Island. It's a great place to enjoy a drink and a cigar. Stogie Geeks listeners can find a $5 coupon on our website by clicking the HCC logo. And by A.J. Fernandez Cigars. A.J. Fernandez cigars are handcrafted in Nicaragua using the finest materials. Brands include the San Latano, Pinolero, and A.J.'s recently released New World brand. Visit them on the web at ajfernandezcigars.com. And by Debonair Cigars. Visit stogiegeeks.com/debonair for a list of retailers who carry Debonair. Buy some today and get a little more Debonair. And by Ocean State Cigars. Try the J. Grotto series, including the Connecticut Shade Silk and limited edition J. Grotto Reserva lines, as well as the new J. Grotto Anniversary series. Visit them on the web at oceanstatecigars.com. Welcome, everyone, to this edition of the Stogie Geek Show. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian. Very excited to be here, especially excited tonight because Will is sitting right next to me, as you can see on our lovely camera. Welcome, Will.
Hey, great to be back again tonight.
Good to have you back in Rhode Island. You're just going to have to move here, dude.
I'll tell you what, like I said, there's no better place for a cigar vacation than Rhode Island.
That's right.
Yep, I mean it.
You visited some local shops again while you were here as well, which is awesome. So
I know, I wish I had more time.
Good to have you in studio.
Thank
Looking
you.
forward to a fantastic episode. Was there anything we wanted to mention before we get into our interview? I don't think so.
No, I think
We're gonna get right into it.
We'll get right into it.
Okay. Our interview this evening is with Juan Martinez of Joya de Nicaragua Cigars. Juan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Will, for having me.
Thank you for coming on. It's a pleasure to have you here. So, Juan, tell us about your background in cigars and how you got started in the industry.
Well, I started thanks to my family. My father is the owner and chairman of Joya de Nicaragua. And I started relating to cigars when I was very young. He bought the company in 1994, so I started visiting the factory and getting to know the people and getting to know the business since very young. Even though at first I didn't want to go into the cigar business, I started helping out a few years back, about 8 years ago, and I started getting passionate about the product, enjoying the people, the company, the events. So that's basically how I got into it. Just falling in love with the business and falling in love with the product. And most importantly, falling in love with the people around the business.
So you mentioned 1994, right?
Yes.
Is that when Joya de Nicaragua started, or it was a company before that and your dad bought the company?
No, Joya de Nicaragua is the oldest cigar manufacturer in Nicaragua. It was established in 1968.
Mm-hmm.
It was established by a couple of Cuban immigrants that moved to Nicaragua to plant tobacco, and they started rolling cigars in a company that they called Nicaragua Cigar Company. That was in 1968. That company went through a very long historic process and evolution, and went through different hands of ownership. And after the revolution in 1990, the factory and the company that owned the factory were privatized, and they were looking for investors. And my father, who was a passionate cigar lover, cigar smoker, and who had a historic relationship with the company, decided to invest and acquire the company. He started working with them in 1992 and acquired the totality of the company in 1994. So, responding to your question, the company is very old, 46 years this year, and my father just became the owner in 1994.
So you must have had some access to some pretty old tobaccos for a company that with such a rich history.
We do. We do not as old as we want. We would want because of how the company was run during the 70s and the 80s. During the 80s, if you know a little bit about Nicaraguan history, we had a revolution in 1979. It was a communist revolution. So the company was nationalized. All the companies were nationalized, as in any communist regime. So the factory was run by the state, basically. And because it was a communist regime back then, we had a commercial embargo by the United States. Very close, very similar to what Cuba has today. That meant that we could not sell products, not anything coming out from Nicaragua could be sold in the United States, not even cigars. So the company had to look for other markets, Europe, the Soviet Union back then, to sell the cigars. But they were not very sophisticated cigar smoking countries, as you can imagine. The Soviet Union was never known to be a very strong cigar smoking country. But they bought the cigars and they paid Nicaragua, the country, they paid us with food, with oil, and with some weapons during the Civil War of the 80s. So during those times, the administration of the tobacco inventories was a little bit complicated. Also, the northern part of the country where the factory is located, Estelí, and also Jalapa and Condega, which are the main tobacco growing regions in the country, were the worst hit during the Civil War. So back in the 80s, there wasn't really the possibility to store tobaccos. People weren't thinking about vintage crops or stuff like that. They were thinking about producing the cigars to be sold immediately or as close as possible, to get some income. So the oldest tobaccos that we get are that we currently have are from some from the 90s and some from the early 2000s. Obviously, the cigar boom in the mid 1990s helped also to push a lot of the tobacco inventories that we had, producing. Honestly, I wouldn't know how many millions of cigars were produced back in 1996, 1997. And that depleted also a little bit of the inventories that we had at our factory. But we do still have some old tobaccos, and we continue to use them in some of our blends.
Now, Juan, when I think of Joya de Nicaragua and the rich history that surrounds it, I think of you being one of the first manufacturers to produce some very strong cigars when that wasn't necessarily the trend way back when.
That is correct. Until 1999, our factory produced mainly one brand of cigar, that is Joya de Nicaragua Clásico. This is a cigar that's the same blend that's been around since 1968, basically. The same brand that's been around since 1968. After the cigar boom, many companies in Estelí especially closed down, and the game changed. So our company, and especially led by my father, Dr. Martinez, and the team back then, were looking for ways to find a different product to cater to the American market, especially. So they started looking for the blend that was the original blend coming out from Nicaragua that was recognized as a very strong, full-bodied cigar back in the 1960s and 1970s. Different to the Cubans, Nicaraguan tobacco was known to be very, very bold. So that's what they started looking for, and they came out with Antaño 1970. This was 2000, the year 2000. And Antaño 1970, which in Spanish is yesteryear, and 1970 referring to the years where the brand had its biggest international recognition back in the 1970s. So this cigar became the first truly full-bodied cigar into the market. That was 2000. Back then, not even the U.S. market was used to strong cigars. As they say, they were used to more medium and mild-bodied cigars. And when this cigar came in, a lot of people were intimidated because it was so strong, spicy, bold, robust. And from then, the trend started. Nowadays, you can't have enough spiciness, enough boldness in your cigars in the U.S.
And it's been 14 years, that cigar, and I considered it a game-changing cigar as well. But 14 years, you've maintained the consistency with that cigar. I mean, it's still a cigar that in fact, I was up here last week, and in one of the local shops, a guy had a 1970 Antonio aging in a humidor, and he gave me one, and it was still a very robust cigar with, plenty of flavor, and it just, it goes to show you that cigar, with all the cigars coming out in the market today, the 1970 Antonio, people still go back to that cigar.
And indeed, and it continues to be our best-selling cigar in the United States. Each year, it grows more and more. Even though we haven't changed, we haven't rebranded the product, we haven't changed the blend. Obviously, the blend has evolved with time. The tobaccos available, even though they're the same seed, come from the same farms, they evolve, obviously. But for us, it's very pleasing, and we're very proud of Antaño 1970, because in the midst of so much competition and so much new stuff coming into market every single year, hundreds of brands coming into market every single year, this brand consistently is one of those legacy brands, that people always refer to the go-to cigar. So yes, we are very proud of Antaño 1970.
Along those lines, Juan, I've had an opportunity to smoke a size which I believe you do not produce anymore, and that's the Machito. Did I say that right?
Yes,
yeah,
the Machito.
Petit Corona.
Yes.
I love that size. And you guys don't have that size anymore, right?
We do actually.
Okay.
Yeah, we do. We continue producing that. We phased out a couple of sizes in Antaño 1970, but Machito continues to be produced. And it sells very well, actually.
Oh, good.
It's a small cigar, being a Petit Corona, so it sells better in Europe, to be honest, than we love in the United States, but still continue to be produced.
I had one. I was looking through my notes here that had 5 years of age in a humidor, and it was fantastic. It was fantastic. I also like the Bellicoso size.
Yeah.
In the Antaño line as well.
Yes.
That tends to be, I think, even probably still to this day, my favorite size in that line. So, are there any new changes to the Antaño line? That's when I think of Joya de Nicaragua, I always associate it with Antaño, because that's always what I've been exposed to, here in the Northeast. And it was one of the first cigars when I really started getting into cigars. It was one of the first stronger cigars that I smoked.
Yep, me too.
Well, Antaño 1970 has we call it the older, bolder brother, which is Antaño Dark Corojo.
Oh, love that cigar.
And your confusion is actually very common, because a lot of people, when they see the brand, they think that Joya de Nicaragua is the Antaño 1970. So when they speak about Joya de Nicaragua, they think about that product. And when some people say Antaño, they think about Antaño Dark Corojo, because it's simpler and they relate it better to that. So the most important change that the Antaño family has had has been the introduction of Antaño Dark Corojo, which we call it a cigar for connoisseurs, because to be honest, it's not a cigar for everybody. It's a very very strong cigar. We call it a 6 out of 5 cigar in strength, because it tends to make some people dizzy. And we recommend that this cigar not to be smoked in an empty stomach. But yes, that's a step above the Antaño 1970. In respect to, yes.
I was going to say, in the Dark Corojo, Antaño Dark Corojo, the smallest size in that line is also a Petit Corona?
Yes.
And that's my favorite size in that line.
That's my favorite size too.
No, that's really cool. So can you talk about the differences really quickly between the blends in the Antaño 1970 and the Antaño Dark Corojo?
The Antaño 1970 is made with a Habano Nicaragua wrapper, and the filler is all Estelí. In the Antaño Dark Corojo, we use a very dark Maduro Corojo wrapper, and the filler. The main difference is that instead of using one single leaf of Ligero, which is what we usually use in the Antaño 1970, in the Dark Corojo, we use 2 leaves of Ligero, or 2 strains of Ligero if you want. That makes a cigar more flavorful, but also more powerful and more nicotine charge, if you want. So it's a higher octane cigar than the Antaño 1970. The blend, the filler itself, they're very close, except for the increase in ligero that the Antaño Darko Rojo has.
Interesting. Very cool. Let's switch to something new. Let's talk about the cigar that we're smoking now. Will and I are both smoking the Joya Red, and this is I was going to say, it must be the Robusto size, 5 1/4 by 50. Tell us about this cigar in the market you were trying to hit with us, and then a little bit about the blend.
Yes, Joya Red is our new cigar. It came out this July in the IPCPR show at Las Vegas. So it's been slowly getting to stores. I think this month we're going to be covering all the orders from that show. So it's going to be available for almost everybody in the United States. Joya Red was precisely developed to contrast or to balance out some of the conceptions that we as a brand, Joya de Nicaragua, have in the United States market. We were talking about the Antaños before, full-bodied, robust cigars. And if you generally speak with a consumer or even with a store owner in the United States, when they think about Joya de Nicaragua, they automatically associate Antaños, Antaño 1970. So Joya de Nicaragua is synonym with strength, with Nicaraguan powerful, with punch. And we find that very often in the U.S. market. Which means that sometimes people who are not prone to smoke or don't like to smoke full-bodied cigars just don't gravitate towards that product because they have the conception that it's going to be a strong brand. Even though we don't only produce the Antaños, we have, for example, Cabineta and we have CYB, which are mild and medium-bodied cigars respectively. A lot of people think that Joya de Nicaragua only produces full-bodied cigar, Nicaraguan strong full-bodied cigars. And we've also found some retailers that when someone comes into the store and asks for something strong, they automatically say, oh, try this, and they bring out Joya de Nicaragua. But as you very well know, the U.S. market is not dominated by strong full-bodied smokers. Actually, I would say we estimate that about 70% of the U.S. market is non-full-bodied smokers. So with Joya Red, what we want to do is to target those smokers, those non-full-bodied smokers, which are the majority of the market. So we developed a product, a cigar, which is medium-bodied. Medium, for some people, is lower than medium, but it's 100% Nicaraguan cigar. Puro, we call it a Nicaraguan puro, but more in the medium flavor, medium strength with full flavor. And the intention is to recover a lot of the flavor in the Nicaraguan tobacco, the richness of the Nicaraguan tobacco, but without the kick or without the intimidating strength that we traditionally find in the Nicaraguan cigars. So while many in the market, many in the industry are promoting their Nicaraguan blends as the stronger version of their blends because they have Nicaraguan tobacco, we want to go the opposite way. We want to say, yes, Nicaragua has strength, but most importantly, it has flavor. It has flavor. It has a very strong flavor, very flavorful, very strong aroma, and it's a very rich and pleasant tobacco to smoke. So the key word for our Joya Red is a pleasant smoke. Now, there's a second myth that we wanted to counteract with Joya Red, and it's that given that the Joya de Nicaragua has been in the market for more than 45 years, many people in the United States, when they think about Joya de Nicaragua, they think about their grandfather's or their father's cigar, especially younger smokers. Oh, they say, oh yes, Joya de Nicaragua. Yes, that's what my dad used to smoke, or that's the first cigar that my friend introduced me to 20 years ago, something like that. So this new brand is communicating to a younger crowd, to a younger, newer smokers. We don't want to say younger smokers because that's not politically correct nowadays. But people who are starting out in the pleasures of smoking cigars. So marketing wise, brand wise, image wise, you can see that it's a departure from our traditional Joya de Nicaragua products. It retains a lot of the classic essence, but with a modern twist. You guys don't have a box in front of you, but if you see the box is something completely different from what we used to doing. It's designed to stand out in the humidor, to call out the attention. The band itself is also very, very clean, classic, but also very elegant and a little bit modern. So that's the two things. This cigar has been designed to talk to the newest smoker, to the younger crowd of smokers.
Yep. Juan, I mean, one thing about this cigar, I mean, it was like I hadn't had a Nicaraguan puro like this ever. In terms of, a lot of these, like, I want to say medium cigars, or a lot of, for guys like me, maybe who smoke fuller, there's what we call morning smokes. And, a
Yes.
lot of times we get in the notion of, Ecuadorian Connecticut's the smoke to go to for that morning smoke. And this one is just kind of a cigar that I think is could easily fit that mold. But not only that, it could smoke any time of the day. Like I said, I remember there was a bunch of guys who were down in Nicaragua at the factory before you announced the cigar, and they were telling me about this cigar, and they said it was something special. And I very impressive cigar here. I mean, this is, I think it was a home run for you guys.
Thank you. The cigar as I said before, the key word for this is pleasant. So when we sought out a cigar to complement our portfolio of products, we had that word in mind. We wanted to be a pleasant smoke, and we achieved that thanks to the expertise of our master blenders, who made the perfect selection of the tobaccos. The wrapper is an Habano seed wrapper. However, you can see it's lighter in color, but it's also thinner because it's a lower priming in the plant. So instead of having the typical thick Habano leaf as a wrapper, we have a thinner, a more delicate, and more flavorful wrapper due to its lower priming. But also the filler is made out of tobaccos, all of them with lower primings, and different from what I mentioned before of the antaños that have a lot of ligero. The Joya Red has no ligero. Instead of using ligero, we decided to use an extra thick viso, which adds a little bit of the strength, but more flavor. So that's the reason why smoking the cigar, you don't find the typical spiciness that you might find in the ligero charged cigars. So that's the purpose, to make it a very pleasant cigar to be smoked any moment of the day. You can smoke it in the morning, you can smoke it in the midday, or in the evening, and you'll still enjoy it. As well, it can be smoked by a very experienced seasoned smoker as you, and it can also be enjoyed by someone who's starting out and just wants to enjoy a very flavorful cigar.
I love that. I factor that into my ratings of a cigar, probably more so than than most, is the versatility. Like, when
point.
can I smoke it? Who can I share it with? What can I pair it with? All those factors for me go into the versatility of a cigar. And I from what I've been smoking of this cigar, I definitely think this is definitely something that I could smoke any time of day. Would I necessarily recommend that you pair it with a 4th Regiment cocktail? I don't think that any cigar would pair very well with a 4th Regiment cocktail, Juan. So, no disrespect there.
No problem, man.
I would pair it with other cocktails that are more suited for cigar smoking. The 4th Regiment, which is whiskey and vermouth.
What is whiskey? Okay.
Yeah, it's a rye whiskey, vermouth, equal parts, with 3 different kinds of bitters. This one says orange bitters, Peychaud's bitters, and celery bitters. We were trying to find a cocktail to use our celery bitters with, because we have lots of cocktail making stuff. This was one of them. That's a very complex cocktail. Yeah, and you finish it off with a lemon peel. So it's a good cocktail and a fantastic cigar, just not meant to blend together at all. So We like to try different cocktails and give our recommendations on it. So that was the
That
one
would
that I
be great.
tried. Let's talk about, Juan. I want to ask you about the Cuatro Cinco. Tell us about that
Yes.
project.
Cuatro Cinco in Spanish is 4-5, and it was a limited edition, a very special cigar designed to celebrate the 45 years of establishment, not only of Joya de Nicaragua as a brand and as a manufacturer, as a manufacturing company, but also to the establishment of the cigar industry in Nicaragua. Because with the establishment of Nicaragua cigars, previously Nicaragua cigars, now Joya de Nicaragua, the cigar industry in the country began. It was the first cigar rolling operation. It was the first brand to be exported out of the country. So it was the stepping stone for other companies to come to Nicaragua to use Nicaraguan tobaccos. So we call it the celebration to the beginning of a company of heritage in Joya de Nicaragua, but also a tribute to the beginning of the cigar industry in Nicaragua. Cuatro Cinco is also a tribute to the people who began the industry. Some of them are still working in our factory even 45 years after they began.
Wow.
If you guys have the opportunity to visit our factory in the near future, you will get a chance to meet at least 8 or 9 people that have 46 years working in the cigar industry in Nicaragua.
Wow.
And they were the pioneers and the first people that started rolling and bunching cigars in Nicaragua back in the late 60s. So this was a very special cigar, not only because of this tribute. It was a limited edition. Only 45,000 cigars were made in 10-count boxes, 4,500 boxes, each box numbered. It was very special also because we used very old tobaccos, actually. As you mentioned before, we had the privilege of having in our warehouses, in our tobacco bodegas, very old tobaccos. So we used some of the oldest Ligero leaves that we had in stock. And we had the opportunity also to age some of those tobaccos in oak barrels. So it's a very interesting blend. It's 100% Nicaraguan puro also, but it's more in the medium, very rich, very creamy, very interesting and complex cigar. Yeah.
Now, Juan, you say puro, right? But talk to me about the different regions in Nicaragua, Esteli, Jalapa, and Condega, and the different tobaccos that come from those regions and their individual characteristics.
So the main tobacco growing regions in Nicaragua are in the northern part of the country. Nicaragua is, if you know your geography, is in the middle of the American continent. So the center of the continent is Nicaragua. In the northern part of the country, we have Esteli, which is it's a valley. It's where all the factories are located, but also where some of the most important tobacco plantations are. Then we have Jalapa, which is the valley of Jalapa in the border with Honduras. And it actually shares border with the Danlí Valley. And this is where I would say the biggest growing regions are located. Mm-hmm. This is Jalapa. It's about 600 kilometers from the capital, Managua. And we also have the valley of Condega, which is more or less in the middle between Esteli and Jalapa.
Now, are there differences in the like flavor profiles or tobaccos from those different regions that you could categorize for people and kind of put a label on?
Yes, there are. First of all, Nicaraguan tobacco is so good because of the richness of the soil. Obviously, Nicaragua is a volcanic country. We have 18 volcanoes, of which 9 are still active. So our soil is very rich in general. Mm-hmm. But especially it's very rich in the valleys, because if you know a little bit of how the valleys are, you have the mountains surrounding the valleys. So all the richness of the soil from the mountains is drifts away during the rainy season and moves to the valley, to the center of the valleys. So the valleys are very rich for growing tobacco. The Esteli Valley is the main characteristic is that the soil is very thick, very dark, very even sticky. So the characteristic of the tobaccos that grow in Esteli, they tend to be very, very strong, very flavorful, but very strong. So if you want to add strength to your cigar, you add some Esteli tobacco, some tobacco grown in the Esteli region. Jalapa, on the other extreme, the soil is thinner. It's more in the I'm trying to translate this into English, into the sandy type of soil. So the tobaccos don't grow as strong, but they grow more sweeter and a little bit more delicate in flavor. So they balance out very well with the Esteli strength.
Juan,
and the Condega Valley.
Juan, do you
Yes.
have a pet lizard, or is that just a natural, organic?
The one on the back.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have many. Nicaragua is invaded with lizards.
Okay, just
Very
checking.
interesting story. Yeah. You'll see many of them moving around in the background.
Yeah, there was one earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yes,
saw that.
you'll see a couple of them, especially at night. They move around.
Excellent.
Very interesting story. I can tell you about that later. They migrated in a container ship with the rice that came from China about a decade ago, and they were not native from of here, and they invaded Nicaragua, and they're basically everywhere, and by the thousands everywhere. One of those things.
So
going back to our topic.
Yeah, you were saying sandy soil in Jalapa,
Yes.
and you said it leads to somewhat sweeter tobacco.
Sweeter tobacco and more delicate in flavor. Always flavorful, but not as strong in nicotine and power as Esteli. So Jalapa tends to be more popular for growing wrapper.
Okay.
Than Esteli generally is used for filler, and Condega is also used for filler. There are also other growing regions in Nicaragua. One of the most interesting ones is called the Ometepe Island. I don't know if you've heard about it.
Yep.
It's a very small volcanic island in the middle of the Nicaraguan lake, more to the south of the country. So it's a completely different geography than the northern part of the country. And the difference, the beauty of this region is that the island is made out of two volcanoes. So the island is just two volcanoes. And tobacco growers grow tobacco. They've been growing tobacco for many decades there in the sides of the volcanoes. So it's a very interesting, very flavorful tobacco that's grown there, and it's used for filler. And a cigar that has Ometepe tobacco, or CYB, for example, previously known as Cuenca y Blanco, has a little bit of the Ometepe, which gives it a very distinct flavor, a little bit woody. Earthy, but it's very interesting flavor too.
Very cool. That was very, very interesting. I learned a lot.
Yep. Oh yeah.
I was so deep in thought, I didn't queue up the next question in my head.
Well, actually, I got a follow-up
Go ahead.
to that. So CYB was an interesting project for the company because one thing that stood out about that project, it was a multinational blend, and it sounded like that Joya de Nicaragua just doesn't have Nicaraguan tobacco that you guys had. You had access to a lot of other tobaccos.
Yes. CYB was a collaboration between our factory, led by my father, Dr. Cuenca, and Jose Blanco, a very well-known Dominican cigar connoisseur. And they blended together a cigar that was designed basically to do something different for Joya de Nicaragua, that's generally focused on Nicaraguan tobacco. Most of our cigars are Nicaraguan puro. Not all of them, but most are. So CYB is a blend of tobaccos from 6 different origins. We have tobaccos from Ecuador, Habano Ecuador wrapper. We have fillers from Peru, the Dominican Republic. The binder is from the Dominican Republic. And filler from Peru and Nicaragua, and from 3 different regions in Nicaragua too. So it's a blend. It's a very complex cigar. It is an interesting project. For me, it's one of the most flavorful cigars I've smoked, and it continues to be very popular. And recently, it's picked up so well in Europe.
No, it's an excellent cigar. And then another unique cigar that you guys came out with, and it kind of gets forgotten about, but I know you still make it, the Cabineta.
Yeah, Cabineta is one of those non-full bodied cigars that I mentioned earlier. It's sold in the United States. It's a mild cigar. It's actually made with a Connecticut shade wrapper grown in Ecuador, and with tapaneira, which basically means black tip of the Habano Criollo on the top. So it's a two wrapper cigar. My personal favorite, not because we make it, because it's one of the most creamy, smooth cigars that I've smoked. And even though it's a mild cigar, it's super enjoyable. It's the perfect pairing with a coffee in the morning. It's the perfect cigar to start your morning. Yes, it's one of our most interesting blends.
Yeah, and it's a Criollo on the cap, right? That you're using.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, towards the end of that, you get that little kick at the end, which I kind of like. Especially if someone's starting out new. Especially, I'll say, smoke this, you'll get a real creamy cigar, and then you'll be able to get a sampling of that spicy kick at the end, which I kind of liked on that.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, the double wrapper cigar is very interesting, in my opinion. And I like the Cabernet as a good morning
Me too.
cigar.
Yeah, I've always liked that cigar.
Absolutely.
Some people think that when they see it for the first time, it's a little bit gimmicky because of the two wrappers, but in fact, it's very functional and it has a very particular purpose. And the idea behind the Habano Criollo tip, the Maduro tip, is to balance out the typical spiciness that the Connecticut shade has, a little bit of spicy, but adding a little bit also of the strength that you mentioned, with some of the sweetness that characterizes the Habano. So it becomes a very smooth, it's a very smooth and creamy cigar.
When we talked about some of the history in Nicaragua as it relates to your company, Will, was there any other topics that we wanted to cover? I feel like we missed a couple.
There were a couple I wanted to hit. I know we
Yeah.
touched on it. We had planned on hitting it. So one of the most interesting things, I'd love for the audience to hear this story, is the company's had an interesting relationship with Somoza, who was the former dictator of Nicaragua. And one of our former U.S. presidents, Richard Nixon, kind of plays into that story. Why don't you tell that story? Because I remember hearing about it, and it's fascinating.
Yes, I actually mentioned a little bit earlier about the complicated history that the company has had. It was established in 1968 by a pair of Cubans. One of them was called Juan Francisco Bermejo, and the other one was called Simón Camacho. Simón Camacho, who later became also the founder of Camacho Cigar in Honduras. So we have a very close relationship also with that part of the cigar industry in Honduras. And they started the factory in 1968 in a very small factory in Estelí. And they started exporting the cigars under the Joya de Nicaragua brand to the United States in 1969. And by 1970, 1971, because you could not import legally Cuban cigars and you could not find Cuban cigars legally in the United States, the market was finding in this brand a very good alternative to Cuban cigars. So, as the story goes, the White House sommelier was in Las Vegas in 1970, and he was offered a Joya de Nicaragua, and he fell in love with the cigar, and he took it back to the White House. So he made it, in a way, the unofficial cigar of the White House, because the diplomatic protocol back then was that after official dinners in the White House, when the presidents invited other dignitaries or other diplomats to dinner in the White House, they would later go to the green room to enjoy some scotch, some whiskey, or some liquor, and they would light up a cigar. And this was a tradition that was started since World War II. With Truman and with Churchill during the negotiations of the World War, and this kept going, and they were smoking Joya de Nicaragua. And in 1971, Somoza, which was the dictator of the country, a dictatorship that lasted 40 years since 1934 here in Nicaragua, was invited. The only time he was invited to come to visit the White House was in 1971 by President Nixon. And after dinner, they were in the groom room, and he was offered a cigar that came from his country under the Joya de Nicaragua brand. Now, he was a very smart guy, even though he was a dictator, and he knew about the production of tobacco and cigars in his country, but he never realized the importance of this brand that he now find it to be the unofficial cigar of the White House because, wow, imagine that surprise. You come to an official reception in the White House and they offer a product that comes from your country. So when he came back to the country, to Nicaragua after his trip, he summoned the Cubans that were owners of the factory, and in a way, he exercised a little bit of political muscle, if you want, and became partner in the company. He bought out one of the two original founders and became partial owner of Nicaragua Cigar, maker of Joya de Nicaragua. And so that's how he becomes part owner of the company. Now, even though he was a dictator, he was also a very good businessman. He owned almost 100% of anything in Nicaragua. He owned land, he owned mines, he owned oil operations, he owned mostly everything. So he wanted part in the tobacco business, and he also enjoyed smoking cigars. So he pushed away the Cubans. The Cubans fled from Nicaragua, and he became the sole owner of the factory until 1979, when he was overthrown by the Nicaraguan revolution, the Sandinista revolution. The interesting part was that even though he was a dictator, he was a criminal, war criminal. He killed a lot of people during his dictatorship. He was a very intelligent man. So he was able to take his brand of cigars, to almost every corner of the world, because he would send the cigars via his diplomatic relationships or his diplomatic outposts in all the country. And he would have good business relationship with many foreign clients. So during his ownership, he was able to grow the brand to a very strong international brand, taking the cigars to many countries around the world. And until, again, I said 1979, when he was overthrown, and the company went to the hands of the state because of the communist revolution.
Now, subsequent to the revolution, after the revolution, or during the revolution, the factory burned down. Is that correct?
That's actually 1978, before the revolution.
It was before the revolution. So was that tied to the revolution, or was it just a fire in general?
No, it was the revolution started in 1968, but it ended in 1979 with the overthrowing of the dictator. But the revolution started in Esteli, actually, in the northern part of the country. So the most intense fighting was occurring in Esteli. So during the wars, or during the initial part of the Revolutionary War, the factory was bombed down by actually Somoza's own planes. They were bombing the city, and they bombed the factory, and the factory burned down as a result of the bombings. We still have some parts of the factory that remain with a little bit of that history in it. Some of the walls we retain where the fire occurred, and basically the factory was destroyed in 1978.
And then when was it rebuilt?
It was rebuilt immediately after the revolution. The workers, they did not stop rolling cigars. They came out of the factory. It was destroyed. It was in rubble. So while they were rebuilding the factory, they were rolling cigars in the yards on the yards of the factory, surrounding the factory, and they started rebuilding the factory. And by, I would say, late 1979, the factory was up and running again.
Wow.
There was some interesting commentary in the chat room about how the perception of cigars in the White House was changed during the Clinton administration.
Yeah.
They stopped the cigar tradition. Actually, Nixon, I think, was the last one. After him, correct me if I'm wrong, it came Johnson, the Johnson administration?
No, Johnson was before Nixon. It was Jerry Ford.
Ford, yes. I apologize. The Ford administration came after that, and that's when they banned smoking any sort of tobacco in the White House, including cigars. I think because his wife was diagnosed with some sort of cancer or something.
Yeah, Betty Ford.
Yes. So they decided to ban any smoking in the White House.
Wow. Then Bill Clinton found a way to make it happen.
Reintroduce
Reintroduce
cigars,
it, knowing Bill.
as it were. Yes,
The
that's really interesting.
Yeah. Now, actually, with the factory, over the past year, you guys have put a lot of operational improvements into the factory, correct?
Yes, actually, over the past, I would say 3 years, it's been a slow process, but we've been investing because it was a very old building, and again, it had suffered not only the bombing down, it also struggled during the civil war in the 80s that occurred in Nicaragua. It also suffered a lot during the hurricanes in 1998. Nicaragua was hit by one of the strongest hurricanes to hit the American continent, which is called Hurricane Mitch, that devastated all of the northern part of the country and the southern part of Honduras. And all the tobacco plantations were destroyed during that hurricane. And the factory, the infrastructure of the city was very strongly hit by the hurricane. So the company had been, patching some of the weaknesses for many years, but it was until about 4 years ago that we started formally rebuilding the factory. And this was the last year of rebuilding the factory.
You mentioned the hurricanes. With the geography of Nicaragua, do you get both Atlantic and Pacific hurricanes?
No, we only get Atlantic hurricanes. We get a lot of thunderstorms from the Pacific, but not formal hurricanes because of the way the winds go from the Caribbean to the Pacific. So all the hurricanes that we get come from the Caribbean, from the Atlantic.
So with Mitch, right? That was
Yes.
For a normal I don't want to say that was a massive hurricane, because from what I see with the geography, that northern part of the country is kind of away from the coast. So that was was that more of an unusual thing, or is Nicaragua the Nicaraguan feels very prone to hurricanes?
We are very prone to hurricanes. The Central American region is very prone to be hit by hurricanes. If the hurricane doesn't go to Florida, or it comes to Central America or to Mexico. So we actually get hit by a hurricane every 2 years. A strong hurricane hits us. And Hurricane Mitch was a Category 5 hurricane.
Yeah, I remember that.
It was so big that it only came close to the country, and it wasn't not so much the winds, but the amount of rain that fell. That because of the northern region is very mountainous, the amount of rain and water that came down resulting in a lot of floodings. So you had a lot of mudslides and flooding coming down from the mountains, and that was the problem that affected the plantations, because coming from the mountains to the valleys and to the lower regions, the floodings were terrible. If you go on the internet and you Google Hurricane Mitch in the videos, you see how catastrophic it was. We actually had, after the hurricane, President Clinton came down and visited the most affected regions. And we lost about, I would say 16,000 people were killed during the hurricane.
Goodness. Wow.
I had another question. What was I going to ask now? Was it a merger with Drew Estate?
Well, no, they're in a distribution
agreement. Yeah, Juan, could you talk about that?
Yes, Drew Estate since 2007 is our U.S. distributor, exclusive distributor. We are two different companies, but they distribute all our brands in the United States. And we also collaborate very closely. We make some of their most popular blends products. We make the Muwat, Mayusi Weisatan. We also produce the Kentucky Fire Cured cigars for them. So we work very closely, even though we're two different companies. We are almost like in a marriage, and they represent our interests in the United States.
You know what's interesting about that arrangement is you're both two so different companies, yet the arrangement from what I see in the U.S., it seems like it works great. I mean, it's just, I'll go to a Drew Estate event, and Joya is always a part of that event, and it seems like there's good synergy. It just seems like, and you would never have expected it because they're just two totally different companies.
That's one of the most interesting experiences we can talk about, because since the beginning, uh, many people did not believe in the relationship. In fact, many people doubted that it would last more than its first year. But it was precisely that, the difference and the contrast between the oldest, most traditional, classic company, which is Joya de Nicaragua, uh, and the newest, most adventurous, most innovative company in the market, be it Drew Estate. That those differences are what have made the relationship stronger. We basically call ourselves two sides of the same coin. And over the past 7 years, we've learned so much, not only in the business part and the manufacturing part, but also in the marketing part from each other, that we've developed a very strong bond. We even see ourselves as family, and we see each other as one, especially working together in the United States. So their reps are not Drew Estate reps; they are Drew Estate and Joya de Nicaragua reps. Also, back in 2007, you have to remember that Drew Estate did not have uh, what they have today in terms of their premium offering. Liga Privada was starting out back in late 2007 and beginning of 2008. So Joya de Nicaragua and the traditional heritage brands that we carried were a very good complement to their portfolio. So they continue to be a very important part of their offering to the retailers and to the consumers, because even though we nowadays have similar products in terms of being premium handmade cigars, their strongest brands continue to be Acid. But when you open up their catalog, you see that we complement each other very well in the product offering.
Really do. Really do.
Any other questions?
Yeah,
for
I'll ask
Juan?
one more. Juan, is there anything you could talk about, like what you guys may be planning for some upcoming projects that you could share?
Yes, we can share many ideas. However, I would like to point out that our company has not been known, it's not very popular for making too many brands too often. We actually we are in the business of manufacturing cigar and developing and building brands. So we try to create products, to create brands that are sustainable, that are consistent, and that are trustworthy to the consumer, such as we mentioned before, Antaño 1970, even after 14 years in the market, it's still a very, very strong brand. So we focus on developing strong brands, and we invest a lot in our products, in the brand, in the branding, in the marketing, in the production of those products. We invest a lot in acquiring tobaccos. So we try to develop one brand at a time. So that's the reason why you won't see us coming out with 2, 3, 4, 5 different brands each year, as some other companies do, because that's not our model. Our model is to invest time, energy, resources in building one brand that the consumers can trust. They can trust, and they can find consistently, and they can enjoy without the threat of, oh, they are no longer producing this cigar. So that's the reason why we invest so much in promoting and doing events for a particular brand. And right now we're focusing our energies on Joya Red, and obviously the rest of our portfolio. But right now we're investing mostly on Joya Red, because we want everybody to try it, to try and to experience this new side of Joya de Nicaragua. And for the future, we are working in another higher end product. Last year we had the limited edition Cuatro Cinco, and because it was so successful, we're working on something in that line,
Oh, wow.
more in the premium, higher priced, older tobaccos, vintage tobaccos type of blend, and that's our current project.
Nice. That's nice.
I'm really liking this Hoya Red. I can't wait to smoke.
I told you were.
It's a good thing there's a box in there. Oh, wait, we have to give those to people,
We have to give.
don't
Well, yeah, we have to give those. Yeah.
Am I
But-
included in the people we give them to? Because I want, I want to take some.
Uh,
No, that's awesome, Juan.
yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
No, thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, it's this was a very interesting segment. I mean, I just learned.
We have 5 more questions for you.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Juan, you forgot to put it in there. Hold on. I should know these off the top of my head. Juan, are you ready to play 5 questions with the Stogie Geeks?
Oof. Should I get intimidated?
You won't have much time to think about it because we're going to get right into them. So,
Right.
Juan, 3 words to describe yourself.
3 words to describe myself: driven, committed, and trustworthy.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
I would say my hands.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Too early to answer that one.
Yeah. In the popular game of Ask Grabby Grabby, do you prefer to go first or second?
Is that a popular game?
In Europe, it's very popular in Europe. Yes.
Grabby, go first or second?
Yes. Ask Grabby Grabby.
I would go first.
Pick 2 celebrities to be your parents.
2 celebrities to be my parents. Dr. Cuenca would be the first to be my father, and my mother would be. I actually don't remember the name of this lady. She's an actress. Very beautiful actress.
Angelina Jolie, because that's who I would pick.
No. It's an older lady.
Betty White, because that's actually was my answer to the question, was Betty White. You can steal my answer. It's totally fine.
Yeah, I'll go with that one, yeah.
Excellent. Juan, thank you so much for appearing on the Stogie Geek Show.
Thank you, Juan.
Thank you guys for having me.
Really appreciate it.
Yes.
And we'll do a contest at the end of the show.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Contest. So stay tuned.
Yep.
We're going to take a short break. Come back with our Stogies for the week. So don't go anywhere.
Thanks, Juan.
Thanks, Juan.
Thank you, Will. Thank you, Paul. Yep.